the Multimedia Ninja Podcast, episode 32. Hello again, and welcome to the Multimedia Ninja Podcast, where it's all about surviving and thriving in the digital convergence. My name is Bradford Rogers, and I'll be interviewing some multimedia ninjas who are making things happen in their respective fields, and sharing tips, tools, and insights for multimedia artists and content creators. As always, you can find show notes at themultimedianinja.com. This week, game audio and music guru, Mr. Chris Rickwood. As you may know, in this podcast series, my friends and I will be talking about all things multimedia, including creativity, shaping your ideas, and how to be more productive doing it, regardless of what kind of content you're creating. We have got an exciting episode for you today, so what do you say we just let's get to it? All right, I am not going to dally about this week because we have an excellent guest with us, Mr. Chris Rickwood. And just to tell you a little bit about him, he is, he's just about been on every game title in the world. Not really. There are a number of people who do similar things, but not too darn many in Atlanta, and not many who have worked on such august titles as Madden 12. Yes. Let's see. Global Agenda, Orcs Must Die, Tribes Ascend, and a little thing called Smite. So I'm just going to get the heck out of the way, and without further ado, please give it up for Mr. Chris Rickwood.
Wow. Thank you.
What's shaking, man?
Please, sit down. No, please.
Yeah, gotta love him. Gotta love him. So, man, I haven't seen you in like several days, I think, since the lunch.
A good, week.
Yeah. And so for people who don't know, if you didn't catch the intro just a second ago, Chris is which title is the best? Is a game designer encompass the composition and sound design, or what's the...
Yeah, I wouldn't say game designer because that implies I actually design games, which I don't.
Audio designer.
Right. So
okay.
I do composition. You know, if you want to go through all the titles that I might hold.
Right.
Audio director, composer, sound designer, sometimes voice director, producer, implementer. I'm basically a black box of video game
right.
audio production.
Right.
So.
Okay. And audio supervisor is probably the highest paying of all those, or
it depends on your deals.
Okay.
You can make quite a bit if you're a savvy freelance composer.
Gotcha. But maybe we can tell them a little bit more than I did in the intro about how you got from infancy to now,
okay.
Minus maybe the first few years.
Okay, sure. So I wanted to be a film composer. I mean, I think most composers that grew up during the John Williams, Danny Elfman days. I saw Star Wars, wanted to do that. But at the same time, I never wanted to do the Hollywood thing. So I was always kind of wondering how I would manage that, because I'm not an extrovert by any means, and it's almost kind of necessary, for
right.
that kind of business to be able to do the Hollywood, go to the parties, meet people kind of thing, which may or may not be true, but when I was younger, that was my image of it, and I wanted to avoid that. But so while I was at college, I heard about games, and I've obviously played games all my life, and realized that might be a better way for me to go in my career, because at the time it was all done in-house. You had to be almost a programmer to do video game music, but I don't think it wasn't so centralized to Hollywood that you couldn't do it in other places. So I decided to pursue it then. But yeah, so that's kind of the short story of it.
So you worked on Pong and Breakout.
That
was me.
that was a little before my time. I was playing those games, but no, I never worked on them.
Right.
I definitely came in kind of, I would say, at the beginning of the golden age. So they had just released like video games that could use live music. You know, CDs were just being I don't want to say invented, but they were becoming more mainstream in video games. So that allowed you to use live orchestras, live guitars if you wanted to. So yeah, I was right at the beginning of that where I was trying to break in. So not a lot of people had used live orchestras or live choirs or live anything. So it was kind of the perfect opportunity to kind of inject my skills into the video game world. Right.
And I'm going to jump around. I was going to ask you this later, but this kind of ties in. You were mentioning the other day at the panel that you I don't know, you're addressing, recording stuff into your DAW, digital audio workstation. And so my question that I did not ask the other day in favor of time was, I'm curious how much of what you record in during the process ends up in the final, or do you have to do a lot of how much gets redone by an orchestra, or how much do you find that for any technical reason, probably very little of that, but
yeah, I would say now it's maybe 90% in the box. Every now and then I get to record an orchestra. We did the game Rising Storm, actually recorded in Nashville at Ocean Way. And when I can, I'll use, live instruments like live percussion, guitar, that kind of stuff. The stuff that I can play myself, I'll usually do. But it's a weird thing in the games that I work on and the schedules I work on. It's almost like time prohibitive as well as cost prohibitive to use live players, because it's literally like we need this in a day or 2 days, 3 days, like 10 minutes of music in a week kind of thing. And then unfortunately I don't have those people on call to just come to my studio and quickly record the stuff. I have to produce stuff, and the way the video game world works is you write something and then people listen to it, and then you'll get changes that have to be made, and because once you put stuff into a game, it could sound and work a lot differently than when I'm just recording it in my studio. So there's a lot of iteration that has to happen. So it's hard to really find a time where you've written and recorded the music, but there's going to be so many changes after that. It's hard to find that deadline of like, okay, now that it's been approved, go back and re-record everything, because by that time the project needs to ship like that afternoon kind of thing.
Yeah. So do you use any particular sound libraries a lot?
I use them all. Whatever sounds best on that particular day. I've just been going through them all. I'll tell you my favorites now. I've started going into the Spitfire library, which is just completely different from, I started off using the East-West orchestral stuff, I think like everybody did.
Storm drums and...
Storm drum was overused. The choir they had was way overused. I really loved their brass. The Hollywood brass was some of the best brass. I fell out of love with them because of their engine was a little tough to work with, especially I'm on a Mac. So, I think that worked worse on the Mac than it does on PC. So I started to really look at all the Contact libraries. So I went to Cinesamples. I love their stuff. I'd actually use their, way overuse their brass. A lot of the ADO stuff, really great. And then all these boutique libraries, like I can't remember the guy's name, but there's a guy that produces all these world instruments that are just fantastic. But yeah, really, I think in my business, and everybody who's doing composition nowadays just has to be up on the latest stuff, because it's so competitive that if your stuff doesn't sound world class, you're going to get left behind.
So you mentioned, we were off mic earlier. We were talking about Ableton and touched on Pro Tools. Am I correct? Maybe you just told me, but do you use Logic?
I use Logic for music primarily. Yeah, I just can't get away from it. I have a love-hate relationship with Logic.
It sounds like Pro Tools.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably more love.
I have a hate with Pro Tools. I abandoned Pro Tools I think at 8. Whenever I don't. It was more. I never needed it. You know, I'm not going into a studio and then needing those sessions and then mixing it. Like if that happens, I have a mixer that would do that. Mm-hmm. So all my tools are usually like production tools, like creative tools. So Logic definitely for music, and it's really mainly because it's the one I know the best. I always dabble in Cubase because there's so many cool. It's a little more musical, right? Like Logic's weird in that everything's based on numbers. So when you want an eighth note, it's literally like /8. And the chord is like /4. You know, and it's really weird in that way. Whereas, you know, you go into Cubase and they actually call them like eighth notes and eighth triplets, and they have chords. They're not numbers. They're actually like, hey, this chord is C, E, G. You know, so it seems a little more musical on that side. There's a lot of cool things, but I just can't wrap my head around like switching DAWs. Like I'll do it for like one project, and they're like, no, I got to go back to Logic because I need that's really quick. You know, and that's really why I haven't switched.
Yeah, I just think of eighth notes as 480 out of 960. Yeah, but
that's hardcore math.
Yeah. The
going by ticks.
Yeah, but I had the same thing. We actually did the Tim's album starting in Logic because I was for various boosters. I was very hot on Logic, and I was where I could do like surgical editing. Lickety split in Pro Tools, and I was like, no, let's use Logic, and I should learn that, and I love it, but it's you know, almost all of the keyboard shortcuts and ways of doing things are different. So, and then I got used to that while we were tracking Tim's thing, and I realized. No, I either need to stick with Pro Tools, which I really, really know, or somewhere Matt Still is hitting himself on the head like, no, you do not. but and TK too, and Corey. But anyway, so I went back to that, and I'm just gonna, if I can't do it in Ableton, I'm gonna stay in Pro Tools. But and I have a hate relationship with Pro Tools, except for the surgical editing capability.
Yeah, I think I mentioned, you know, I used Ableton for sound design now. I mean, it's just the Ableton with Max MSP is kind of unbeatable as far as trying to like really mangle your sounds into new interesting things, and it's very creative in that you don't feel, especially in that the clip view, you don't feel confined to a timeline. You're just like, all right, this is happening, and you just kind of throw a bunch of stuff kind of against the wall and then mix it together and see what happens. And I think Ableton allows that to happen a lot easier than any other DAW out there.
It's a very right brain.
Yeah.
And actually, on the back end too, on the performance end, which is one reason I'd love to do a whole album start to finish. We have the Grand VJ plugin, so we can put visuals up as another track in Ableton, and if we jump to like the chorus scene or the guitar solo scene, or you know, this, that, or the other, it can do anything from take the iSight camera on the MacBook that's on my keyboard stand to pre-done text and visuals to stuff from Tim's music videos and have that synced in. And we can, if I were doing the whole thing start to finish, we'd have all our material. So in this case, I'm gonna have to take all the stems from Pro Tools and just the audio files, and then set them up in Ableton. But that's a whole nother story. So, but it'd be really bitching just to do start to finish. I'd love to do that.
Yeah, do it, man. Let's see what happens.
And you mentioned Reaper. I am totally. I've heard about it over and over, but tell me what you use that for and what the attraction is.
So Reaper, actually, before I started using Ableton, I was converted to Reaper to do, again, sound editing. And it really, it's super lightweight. I want to say it fits into like 4 megabytes. So you don't get all the overhead that you would get with every other DAW. But it just has like features that every other DAW does or doesn't have. And, you know, it's like, it's a DAW that it can be overwhelming because there's so many features, but there's also that time, you know, if you think about like, hey, I would like to do this, I wonder if I can do that. There's probably a way you can do it in Reaper. And really what got me was I watched these videos because I hate the look of it. It's really an ugly DAW. And that's kind of a big part. I think, you know, if you're looking at this all day, you kind of want it to be.
Does it look like DOS or something?
Yeah, it doesn't look like DOS. It looks like definitely a
Windows
PC,
3.1.
like old, like Windows 3.1.
Yeah.
Designer, like programmer, probably designed the UI, like the art in it. It's like it's really, really ugly. But everything's hidden in menus, and like all those menus are attached to key commands, so you could do everything with the keyboard. But the other thing is you have. I was watching this YouTube video of this guy editing drums, and he was like, "I need to like pet my dog while I'm." You might have this problem too.
Yeah.
You have to pet your dog
Where's
while
Daisy?
you're actually editing drums. You know, multi-track drums. And he says, "So I can do it." He could actually do it one-handed.
Oh, right.
So he was like chopping like the 16 tracks, slip editing them, and then deleting all with one hand. And I was like, "This is." What's going on? This is magic. So I looked into it and I was like, okay, yeah, you can set up things like, so I have it where you can drag on the bottom half of a clip and it'll pitch it up and down. If you shift drag on it, it'll pan it left and right. You can fade really easily. You have what are called clip effects. So on every single item, you can have an effect rack basically. So all your plugins can just affect one clip. And those clips can now be automated, which is even crazier. So, you know, you could throw, almost like Ableton, you could throw just a bunch of sounds onto one track. And then if one little part of that track, you know, one clip on that track needs a delay on it, you can affect just that delay, that one little clip instead of the whole track, which in sound design is really, really nice.
Yeah.
I could go on and on about Reaper, but I would say if you're interested in doing like sound editing, give it a look and maybe give it like 2 weeks because it takes a long time to kind of understand like why it's powerful. But if you just dig into customizing it to, you know, the way you work, I think you'll find that it's a really nice DAW.
Oh, nice.
I don't get paid for them. I don't get paid by them either. So that's.
Speaking of that, is it free or was it cost?
It's not free. I mean, it's free if you want it to be because the trial goes on forever. But it's for single use, like non-professional is like $60.
Okay.
And then professional use is like $250. So it's not. I mean, you might as well be free.
It's up to you to tell them if you're a professional or not.
I mean, you'll get this little, exactly. It's all honor system, which is, you know, I love that in software. It's like, you know, it's nice that the companies trust their users, which it's hard nowadays to really do that. But they've done it and they have just a rabid following of fans. So, you know, it's good for them.
That and freemium, I like that too, where the free one actually has something useful. Right. And they've calibrated it just correctly to where you want to get the premium. Yeah. But speaking of shameless commercial plugs, we will be right back after this brief message on behalf of Timothy P. Green.
Hey, Timothy P. Green here. Are you tired of listening to the same old shit? I know I was. Just put in your email address and get access to some of the freshest new music you've heard in a long time. Let's have a party!
Well, yeah, I enjoyed that. That was a little commercial from Tim's CD, which you already know where to get it. But moving right along, I wanted to ask you for people, and this was where I was going to start, but for people who are not familiar, maybe you could give a little overview of like how huge the game industry is comparatively to even film and TV at this point. I think it's quite large.
It is large, and I actually don't have those numbers, but they, you know, the politicians and the lobbyists all talk about that. You know, the industry's bringing in. I'm not going to throw a number out there, billions. You know, and comparatively, it's supposedly bigger than, you know, the Hollywood box office brings in.
That's the stat that I thought I had heard.
Yeah, I mean, because it's a nice little talking point, right? But I couldn't give you the numbers or even, you know, what study that was to see if that's true or not. But on the other hand, what I have seen definitely is that it's becoming more mainstream. You know, you rewind 10 years ago, I would go to, you know, meetings around town and talk about well, first of all, there were barely any like video game centric meetings. This was always like, I was always going to like
composers group or
composers groups or like film groups or media groups. I went to all of them in Atlanta, and I would tell them what I'm doing, and they're like, what is it like? What does games have music? What you can. We should be doing that.
Beep, boop.
Yeah, exactly. Like people actually like write that stuff. Like, yeah, they do. And I'm making bank doing it. So it was at that time nobody knew about it. I was kind of like the bastard child of the music industry. But like fast forward to today, everybody wants to get into it. So it's kind of reached that tipping point of going from something that just your kids did to now like, okay, gamers themselves are large demographic of the general population, and then the people who are doing them, it's a real job, and you can go to school for this, and definitely like all composers are now kind of looking to get into this because they see it's like, oh, films are still great, but this is just another outlet that they can work on. So it's definitely grown. Even if you don't compare it, industry to industry, it's definitely changed.
Gotcha. This is a good time, I think, for a listener question. Brad, no relation, was asking what a typical day looks like. He didn't ask that about you, but I saved it for this episode. So
okay.
What does a typical, since nobody knew who the guest was before just now.
Oh, wow.
It's a secret.
Mystery guest, huh? So typical day, I really try to keep normal hours. So it's changed a little bit. I used to get up super early, and I still try to do that. Like get up at 5 and pop out some work. I'll like either write or I'll do sound design, something that's really hard and creative. Like right at the beginning of the day, I don't even like shower, eat, or anything before I do that. So that's like 5 to 7-ish when my family starts waking up. So it's a good 2 hours that you get in of work. And really what's nice about that is you can later that day, by the time it becomes like lunchtime, I've probably done as much work as everybody else that's woken up and they go to work at like 10 o'clock, So it's kind of nice. You feel good about yourself. It's a nice little, hey, I've accomplished something. So after that, it's and truthfully, like nowadays, I'm waking up at about 7 o'clock, so I'm doing maybe one hour. Yeah, it's just because it changes. It's hard to wake up at 5, especially like during the summer when your kids are up and you're going to bed later and later. That schedule gets skewed a little bit. But once winter comes around, where everybody's kind of hibernating, it's actually pretty easy to do. So then I'll do. It's weird because I'm wearing that audio director hat. I do a lot of management. So there's just checking in like what the status is of each game that I'm working on. I'm working on like 4 or 5 projects now. Trying to make sure those projects are getting looked at and that we're doing what we need to be doing. So I'll make sure everybody has tasks so they're not like sitting on their hands. Trying to make sure dependencies are taken care of. And then, I take a solid lunch. Like I take regular breaks because I think that's really important. So I'll take an hour for lunch, 12 to 1. And then usually, like I am somewhat creatively spent like by like 2 o'clock, 2 or 3 o'clock. If I could just sleep during that, I would. But, that's socially unacceptable, so I don't do that. But I do less important work. So that's when I'll do things that don't require a lot of creative energy, but they're still productive. So like putting sounds in games, like trying to fix bugs, doing like automated processing. When you have in video games, you get a ton of assets. So sometimes you have to take those assets, top and tail them, which you can kind of automate. Dialogue especially, you're getting thousands of lines. So you're kind of mastering those things. So I'll do that kind of work and until the end of the day, and then I'm pretty good about stopping work at like 5 p.m. when my family's all there, and do that kind of thing. And then sometimes I'll go back depending on what deadlines there are. I'll definitely have to go in, and because I'm actually pretty creative. I find like from 9 o'clock to about 1 a.m. So there's times that if I have to, I'll do some work then rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Or do things like this, so.
Right.
Luckily, in my industry, there are a lot of opportunities to just get out of the studio. When I can record instruments, I'll do that, or have lunch with people, that kind of stuff. So that's really important.
And/or frozen beverages.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. I wanted to get to one segment which we call "What the heck are you doing?" which is where I ask what hardware, software, philosophical idea, tactic,
awesome,
whatever is rocking hard for you today, this week, this month, or this year.
Okay. So what part do you want to talk about?
Oh, you pick one.
What's rocking hard?
Yeah. Which ninja tool?
That's a good question.
Or technique.
We talked about the Ableton thing, so that's kind of my jam right now.
Cool.
I'll tell you some things I'm looking forward to. Maybe that's because I guess as a a creative who's on deadlines, I tend to get into ruts. So I've probably for the last month I've been using kind of the same techniques. But what I'm looking forward to, there's 3 things. Number 1, the Moog Voyager was discontinued, and that is one of my. I went to their base in Nashville, right? So I went by their factory and everything, and I tried it out. I tried all the synths out, and there's something about the Voyager that even with headphones on, I could feel the oscillators kind of rattling my bones, which I'd never experienced before. And I was like, man, I've got to get one of these. Unfortunately, they're like $3,000. So at the time I was like, I can't like spontaneously go to the factory and grab like a $3,000 synth. So I bought the little Slim Fatty or whatever it was, which is fine, but there's only 2 oscillators in there, and that definitely doesn't give me the feeling that I had when I played that Voyager. So I'm strongly considering picking one of those up before they become completely scarce and the price of them goes way up, because I think they're for me at least the best sounding analog synth out there right now. Full disclosure, I haven't tried a whole lot of those, so that might be a grand statement, but I think I'm safe.
Sure.
The Moog I think has been around, right?
Yeah. It's got one of the coolest names to begin with. So.
Yeah. Which everybody mispronounces.
Yes.
So I think I'm saying
it's
it
not
right.
Moog. It is Moog.
Okay. Yeah. The second thing is the Native Instruments announced their new keyboard, which is the I can't remember the complete keyboard, which integrates with all their software. And I use Native Instruments everywhere. So I use Contact, I use Absinthe, I use Massive, and Reactor, and Battery actually, pretty much on a daily basis. So the fact that it integrates, I was like, yeah, I got to get one of these. But they only had 61 key versions. But just I think 2 days ago they talked about their new 88 key version, which is perfect for me. So I'm really looking at that. Right now I use the old Yamaha KX88 from the 80s, which is fine, but it's the keys are fantastic, but it's a little flaky. It actually uses MIDI, so it's not like going into using USB, which isn't a problem because luckily I use an RME for my interface, and that has a MIDI interface on it too. So I'm okay there, but it's like, wow, this is worth taking a look at, So it's integrated with all the software I use, and I think they're going to have a lot of third-party support with that too. And it's 88 keys finally. So if it plays well, I might be replacing my KX88.
And you ran into this at the game, the recent confab?
This was just I just got spam.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I was like, oh, look at this spam. What? Okay, yeah, this looks good.
Because I saw you at the, I saw the guest ID.
Oh, it's
where
Siege,
you have 10 different titles at
right,
Siege.
Yeah.
So was that just last weekend, or?
It was this past weekend.
Right on.
Yeah.
So, by the way, I noticed. Actually, one of our previous guests, and the only other person to be on video, not here, but on the boat, is Watson Wu.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I actually first became aware of him from seeing you two at somewhere on Facebook at a gaming thing. So,
yeah.
serendipity. I don't know what the upshot of all that is.
Yeah,
but,
that guy has like the worst job, right? So he's either flying to Vegas and recording super rare guns, or he's like
tanks.
down in Florida, or tanks, or he's down in Florida like recording super rare cars and expensive things like Bugattis and Ferrari F40s. It's a tough life, I guess. Somebody has to do it.
So we did a thing on JC Sales on the boat. And did some field recording of the boat, but we did podcast, I think 24 aboard the sailboat. So
nice.
Sorry, we're not in Florida.
Yeah, what?
But you're the first studio guest that, God willing, will be on the actual YouTube clips and stuff.
Oh, cool.
You have first right of refusal, though.
I should have. Can you make me thinner?
Only if I can make me thinner. I suggest a beard.
I can't grow. I'm Asian. I can't grow a beard.
Makes me look like I have a chin. Well, we're almost out of time for this week. We will be out of time. Can you come back for another segment? We got a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for now for Mr. Chris Rickwood. Oh, yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Well, that just about wraps up another episode of the Multimedia Ninja Podcast. I hope you come back next week and bring your friends. Special thanks to this week's guest, Mr. Chris Rickwood. And to you for listening, kind listener. Don't forget you can subscribe to the Multimedia Ninja Podcast right there on themultimedianinja.com at the little top right clicky deal that says subscribe. Or if you're on your iPhone or Android or whatever mobile device, it may be at the bottom of the main column. And of course, you can also do it on the iTunes on your desktop, your laptop, or whatever top. You can hit me up also on the Tweeter at Bradford Rogers. And ditto for Instagram. Love me some Instagram. And as always, you can follow my other adventures and misadventures at bradfordrogers.com. Go figure. Finally, just a reminder, if you need any help or advice regarding anything multimedia, and I mean anything, feel free to hit me up either with a comment on this week's episode or by the little contact thing in the menu bar. With all that, it's about time for me to go get some lunch, so I'm going to leave you with just one thought. Thomas Fuller said, "All things are difficult until they're easy." See you next week.